welcome to The Real News. I'm Kim Brown. A major decision by the UK Supreme Court protects the rights of organizations, including government organizations, to boycott, divest, and sanction the state of Israel, even companies that support the exploitation of Palestine. In 2016, the British government issued severe guidelines banning government organizations and even local governments from participating in the BDS movement in any way. Now, this has impacted the local government pension scheme, the LGPS, which were obligated to invest the pension money of public service workers in companies that violate international law. Now, that decision was met in Britain with some resistance. Channel 4 of the BBC spoke with Rafeef Ziada from the Palestine Society at SOAS University.
I think it's disgraceful that the British government has decided to intervene in this way, attacking local democracy and stopping councils from making ethical decisions around investments. I think the public has every right to be able to intervene in these issues, to talk to our elected officials, and to have an impact on corporations that we disagree with, involved in the arms trade, against sweatshop labor, and for Palestinian rights as well.
In response to the government decision at the time, world-famous journalist Glenn Greenwald said that the attempt to ban BDS is the worst attack on freedom of speech in the West in contemporary times. So joining us to discuss this today is Ben Jabal. Ben is the director of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, which is the largest UK civil society organization dedicated to securing Palestinian human rights. He joins us today from London. Ben, thank you so much for being here.
Nice to be here, Kim.
So Ben, let's go back to 2016 for a moment, because I wanted to get your opinion about the British government's decision to ban a boycott. We'll get into did they have the right to do so in just a moment, but I wanted to get your take as to why they took this extraordinary step to put this down on paper.
Yeah. Well, I think, and we said this at the time, we had to really understand the government's move as part of a global campaign that's been going on for many years, in which Israel, with the support of friendly allies amongst Western government, has sought to use what's defined as lawfare, so to seeking to introduce laws that effectively criminalize BDS. So we've seen laws introduced in the United States. I think more than 20 states have such laws. We've seen them introduced in France. We've seen them introduced in Germany. It's part of a wider campaign to delegitimize the Palestine Solidarity movement and delegitimize activism for Palestine. And these regulations that the government introduced in the UK in 2016 were the first serious attempt we'd seen in the UK to do something similar and to attempt to prohibit action that was effectively people making decisions not to invest money in companies that were complicit in Israel's violations of international law, to attempt to prohibit that sort of activity.
So talk to us a little bit about the appeal. What exactly did PCS argue in front of the UK Supreme Court? And how did the government defend its decision to impose a ban on BDS on local governments?
Well, our argument was framed around, first of all, the obligation, as we saw it, of public bodies not to be complicit in having their money invested, having the money of their pension scheme holders invested in companies that were complicit in international law violations, complicit in the violation of human rights. It was about the rights of pension holders on how their money was going to be spent, that if they said, I don't want my pension invested in a company that's helping build illegal settlements, they should have that right. The grounds on which we had to fight the case were narrower. So the grounds on which we fought it and on which we won were an argument about the fact that the government actually did not have the legal right to do what it was doing because pension law did not allow it to do that. In answer to your question about how did the government justify what it was doing, I mean, the regulations actually didn't mention Israel or Palestine at all. They were framed in a way that said local government pension schemes cannot choose to divest in support of boycott, divestment and sanctions campaigns in any situation where the UK government itself has not impose sanctions. So it didn't specifically mention Israel, but in all of the rhetoric around the regulations, the government made clear this was about stopping BDS that was targeted at companies complicit in Israel's violation of Palestinian human rights. When the regulations were announced, they were actually announced, if I recall correctly, in a press conference in Tel Aviv. So the minister responsible announced these in Tel Aviv and made clear that these were part of their view about the illegitimacy of boycott. And the way they framed that, why did they say that boycott was illegitimate? Because they used the line that, without stating it boldly, that boycott is inherently anti-Semitic, they used the line that boycott campaigns damage community cohesion. In other words, that boycott campaigns are in some way targeted at the Jewish community, which is inherently untrue. The BDS movement is run on anti-racist principles. It targets complicity and not identity. It targets companies and institutions and organizations that are directly supporting Israel's violation of human rights.
There's a lot of conflation between criticism of the state of Israel and anti-Semitism, but the court ruled in favor of PCS. What reasons did they give behind their decision?
So as I say, we made the argument, and the thrust of our campaign obviously was the ethical position, but we had to fight it. And the reason we took the case is we were advised that we had good legal grounds and that the most likely chance of success was that the government didn't have the power. There's a principle in UK law, relies on a Latin phrase called ultra vires. It means you're acting outside the boundaries of the powers you have. So the argument that was used and that won was the pension regulations, the pension law to which the government attached these regulations puts obligations upon pension companies to make decisions that are always in the benefit of their members, to announce proper investment decisions, etc. And the argument that won was the government did not have the right to attach conditions to how they invest money that had nothing to do with any of those considerations, that they were to do with foreign policy positions. So that's the basis on which we won. So it's a very important victory. Obviously, the legal principle was narrow, but as a line in the sand against the government attempts to introduce anti-BDS law, it's very important. But we do have another battle on our hands because the government, in the recent Queen's speech, so that's the statement that a new government makes when it's elected about what laws it intends to bring in over the next parliament, over the next 5 years. The government has announced that it intends to introduce another law that would ban all public bodies from supporting BDS campaigns. So we now have to take the fuel from this victory and build a coalition, which we're in the process of doing, to oppose the next law that the government is trying to bring in.
You know, the court's decision is important and interesting, not just for people in the UK, but really all over the world. And here in the US, various politicians, such as New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, has said that they can't control what people buy or choose not to buy, but state institutions can nevertheless ban BDS activities and choose to boycott any company or organization that practices BDS. So in a way, if it's a public institutions don't belong to the people, but are the private tools of politicians to promote a pro-Israel agenda. Do you think that the decision of the UK Supreme Court will have an impact beyond Britain's borders?
I mean, I hope it does in two ways. One, I think it encourages campaigners across, and we've had huge numbers of messages coming into us from fellow solidarity activists around the world. We've had messages, numerous messages from Palestine. One that stuck with me is someone who described it as a historic day. And I spoke to them and said, look, you might be overplaying this in the sense it's a narrow victory, it's an important victory. They said, no, Ben, understand, and I'm a Palestinian myself, so I did understand, we Palestinians don't win many victories against the UK government. And of course, there's a whole history going back to the Balfour Declaration that informs that statement. And they also said to us, we're all walking a foot taller today. So it's important as an act of solidarity. It's important as encouraging others. We can fight back against these laws where we have legal tools available to us. They are something we should use as part of our campaigning, as well as making the political case. They're also, though, important in other ways. We hope the more victories we win like this as an international solidarity movement, the more we send a message to those trying to introduce these pernicious laws that they will be opposed, and that we can build political campaigns and public support and use the law ourselves where it's available to us to oppose these attempts that are really about suppressing the Palestinian people's right to call for action by the international community to oppose their oppression, but individuals' rights to say, well, you know, I wish to show solidarity for the Palestinian people, and I want to take action to ensure that my country, my institutions, my local authority, my university is not complicit in supporting this injustice in how it spends its money, particularly where that money might belong to me. It might be my money that they're choosing to invest in illegal and immoral activities.
A major decision announced by the UK Supreme Court and a big victory for the BDS movement. Today, we've been speaking with Ben Jamal. Ben is the director of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. He's been joining us today from London. Ben, we appreciate your time in speaking with us. Thank you so much.
Nice to be here, Kim.
And thank you for watching the Real News Network.
Thanks a lot for watching. Appreciate it. But do us one more solemn favor. Hit the subscribe button below. You know you want to. Stay up on the videos.